They thought rejecting her would break the healer. They thought Aurelia Moonshadow was weak, broken, unworthy of standing beside an alpha, let alone a king. But they were wrong. The Alpha King wasn't hunting for a queen. He was running from his fated mate. And in the castle where silver moonlight met ancient stone, where wolves walked as men and power was measured in the strength of your blood, one woman would rise from the ashes of her own wedding night. This is how it began. The great hall of Shadowcrown Castle had never looked more beautiful. 300 candles flickered in iron sconces along walls that had stood for 5 centuries. White roses imported from the southern territories at enormous expense, cascaded from every archway. The scent of them filled the air, sweet and delicate, mixing with the wood smoke from the massive fireplace and the crisp autumn wind that slipped through the open windows. Aurelia stood in the bride's chamber, looking at herself in the mirror. The dress had taken 3 seamstresses 4 weeks to create. Silver fabric that caught the candlelight like moon water. Tiny crystals sewn into the bodice, each one placed by hand. The train stretched 6 feet behind her, pooling on the stone floor like liquid starlight. She looked like a queen. She felt like a fraud. "Stop that." Molly, the head housekeeper, appeared behind her in the mirror. The older woman's face was stern, but her eyes were kind. "No dark thoughts. Not today." "I'm not having dark thoughts." "Your mother would have been proud." Aurelia's throat tightened. Her mother had been dead 9 years, killed by a plague she'd given everything to stop. Aurelia had been 16, standing in the rain, watching them burn her mother's body because the infection was too dangerous to bury. A healer who couldn't save herself. But she'd saved 3 packs, hundreds of lives. Children who would grow up, have families, build futures. That had to count for something. "She would have wanted you to smile," Molly said gently. Aurelia smiled. It didn't reach her eyes, but it was enough. The ceremony began at sunset. She walked down the aisle alone. There was no one to give her away. No father, no brothers, no uncles. Just her, moving through the candlelight, past 300 faces turned toward her with curiosity and judgment. Most of them had never expected this match. Aurelia Moonshadow was nobody. An orphaned healer with no pack, no wealth, no bloodline worth mentioning. Yes, she had skill. Yes, her healing gift was strong. But the Alpha King could have had anyone. He could have had Isabella Ashford, daughter of Councillor Magnus Ashford, one of the most powerful men in the kingdom. Beautiful, educated, wealthy, connected. Instead, he'd chosen the healer, and nobody understood why. Aurelia reached the altar. Thaddeus Shadowcrown stood waiting. He was magnificent, 6 feet 5 inches of pure alpha power. Broad shoulders, narrow waist, muscles that spoke of combat training, and wolf runs through the deep forest. His hair was black, pushed back from a face that could have been carved from granite. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, a thin scar running from his left eyebrow to his temple, earned in the war against the rogue packs 3 years ago. But it was his eyes that caught her, steel gray, cold, assessing, looking at her like she was a problem he hadn't solved yet. They'd spent 6 months courting, long walks through the palace gardens, conversations about herbs and healing, about pack politics and territory management. He'd seemed interested. He'd listened when she spoke, asked questions, remembered details. Once, under the old oak tree at the edge of the rose garden, he'd almost kissed her. She'd felt the moment building, the way he'd leaned in, the way his eyes had dropped to her mouth, the electric tension in the air between them. Then he'd pulled back, just a step, just enough to break the spell. "We should return," he'd said, his voice rough. "The council will be waiting." She'd told herself he was being respectful, taking things slow, that when they were married, when they had privacy, when the political necessities were handled, then he would let himself feel what she felt. She'd been such a fool. The priest began the ceremony. Ancient words in the old language, blessings from the moon goddess, promises of unity and strength. Thaddeus repeated his vows. His voice was steady, formal, giving nothing away. Aurelia repeated hers. Her voice shook only once on the word forever. The priests bound their hands with a silver cord. "By the light of the moon and the strength of the wolf, I pronounce you mated, king and queen, Alpha and Luna." The hall erupted in applause. Thaddeus kissed her. It was brief, perfunctory. His lips barely touched hers before he pulled away. But for 1 second, she felt something. A spark, a flicker of heat that raced through her blood and made her wolf, the small animal part of her that all shifters carried, lift its head in recognition. Then it was gone. They turned to face the crowd. Thaddeus's hand was on her lower back, guiding her down the aisle. They walked together through the cheering guests, through the shower of rose petals, out into the courtyard where tables had been set for the reception feast. Music played, people danced, courses of food appeared and disappeared. Aurelia smiled until her face hurt. She accepted congratulations from people she'd never met. She drank wine she didn't taste. And all the while she watched Thaddeus. He was polite, distant. He danced with her once, holding her at exactly the proper distance, moving through the steps with mechanical precision. When the dance ended, he released her immediately. "I need to speak with the council," he said. "I'll return shortly." He didn't return shortly. Aurelia sat at the high table alone, watching the celebration continue without its king. Isabella Ashford caught her eye from across the courtyard. The other woman was stunning in a deep crimson gown, her dark hair piled high, diamonds at her throat. She smiled at Aurelia. It wasn't a kind smile. The hours dragged on. Midnight came and went. Finally, mercifully, Molly appeared at her elbow. "Your Majesty," she said quietly, "it's time." Aurelia stood. Her legs felt numb. The guests cheered and whistled as she was escorted from the courtyard, through the castle corridors, up the stairs to the royal wing, to Thaddeus's chambers. The doors were massive, dark wood carved with wolves and moons and ancient symbols of power. Molly pushed them open. "I'll help you with the dress," she offered. "No," Aurelia's voice came out stronger than she felt. "I can manage. Thank you, Molly, for everything." The old woman's eyes were sad. She knew something, but she said nothing, just squeezed Aurelia's hand once and left. The doors closed with a heavy thud. Aurelia stood in the center of the room looking around. She'd never been in here before. The king's private chambers were forbidden territory. The room was beautiful, massive. A bed big enough for 4 people dominated one wall, draped in black silk. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the forest. A fireplace large enough to stand and burned low, casting dancing shadows. And there was Thaddeus. He stood by the windows, his back to her, still in his formal clothes. The candlelight caught the silver embroidery on his jacket. "Thaddeus," she said softly. He didn't turn. The silence stretched. 1 second, 5, 10. "There's something you need to understand." His voice was cold, formal, the voice he used with counselors and foreign ambassadors, not the voice he'd used during their courtship. Her stomach dropped. "This marriage is political," he said to the window. Nothing more. 4 words. That's all it took. Aurelia felt the world tilt. Her vision blurred. She gripped the bedpost to keep from swaying. "My heart is bound elsewhere." He finally turned to face her. His expression was carved stone. "To Isabella Ashford, we share a blood oath from childhood." Blood oath. The words hung in the air like poison. A blood oath was sacred, unbreakable, made by mixing blood and speaking binding words under the full moon. Most were created between mates, but some were made young. Political alliances sealed before children could understand what they were promising. "The council insisted on this union," Thaddeus continued. His eyes looked past her, not at her. "You're a healer of exceptional skill. The kingdom needs that alliance. But don't expect anything beyond what's required for appearances." Aurelia couldn't breathe. All those walks, those conversations, that moment under the oak tree, none of it meant anything. She was a political asset, a useful tool, a healer to be owned, not a woman to be loved. Pride is a strange thing. It can hold you together when everything else is falling apart. When your heart is breaking and your world is crumbling and you want to scream until your throat bleeds, pride can keep you standing. Aurelia lifted her chin. She met his gaze directly, even though it cost her everything. "Then don't expect anything from me either," she said. Her voice was steady, clear. "Not my tears, not my pleas, and certainly not my heart." For just a second, something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or regret, but it vanished so quickly she might have imagined it. "Your chambers are prepared next door," he said. "The maid will show you." He gestured to a door she hadn't noticed, a connecting door between their rooms, close enough to maintain appearances, far enough to make the rejection clear. Aurelia turned and walked toward it. She didn't run, didn't cry, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. She opened the door, stepped through, and closed it behind her. The room on the other side was smaller but beautiful, soft blues and silvers, a smaller bed, windows facing the gardens instead of the forest. A maid was waiting, her eyes downcast. She helped Aurelia out of the wedding dress in silence. The silver gown that had taken 4 weeks to create. The dress she would never wear again. It crumpled to the floor like a fallen star. The maid left. Aurelia stood in her white nightgown, staring at nothing. Then she heard it. Laughter. A woman's laughter coming through the wall, through the connecting door, from Thaddeus's chambers. Isabella was there. With him. On Aurelia's wedding night. That's when she finally let herself collapse. She sank to the cold stone floor, her nightgown pooling around her like spilled milk. The sobs came in waves. Harsh, gasping, ugly sounds that tore through her chest. Through the wall, she could hear voices. Isabella's, high and intimate. Thaddeus's, lower, warmer than he'd ever sounded with her. They were together. Right now. While Aurelia sat on the floor in the next room, still wearing the nightgown she'd bought for her wedding night. She cried until there were no tears left, until her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen and her whole body ached. Then slowly she stood. She walked to the mirror on shaking legs. Her reflection looked back, eyes red and puffy, hair in tangles, face blotchy and marked with dried tears. But underneath all that destruction, she saw something else, something harder, stronger. She was Aurelia Moonshadow, daughter of the woman who had sacrificed herself to save hundreds. She'd held dying children in her arms and pulled them back from death's door. She'd set broken bones in battlefield tents. She'd faced down infections that made seasoned healers flee in terror. She had survived everything life had thrown at her. She would survive this too. By the time the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Aurelia had made her decision. If Thaddeus wanted a political arrangement, she would give him exactly that. Nothing more, nothing less. She wouldn't beg, wouldn't cry for him, wouldn't waste another moment hoping for something that was never going to happen. She called for the maids. They came quickly, eyes wide with curiosity and pity. Everyone in the castle would know by now. Servants always knew everything. "I need a bath," Aurelia said. Her voice was hoarse from crying, but steady. "And then I'll need help dressing." While the maids prepared the bath, Aurelia carefully folded the wedding dress. The silver fabric felt heavy in her hands. She placed it in the wardrobe, pushing it to the very back. She would never wear it again. The bath was hot, steam rising, scented with lavender. She sank into it and let the heat work into her aching muscles. When she emerged, she chose her dress with care. Not white, not bridal, not passive. Forest green, the color of new growth, of resilience, of life that pushes through stone. She braided her hair back severely. No soft curls, no romantic styling. Just practical, controlled, perfect. When she looked in the mirror this time, she saw a woman in armor. Good. The great hall was already filled with nobles when she entered for breakfast. 300 pairs of eyes turned toward her. The whispers started immediately, a susurrus of sound like wind through dry leaves. They all knew. Of course they knew. The healer queen, rejected on her wedding night. Aurelia kept her spine straight and her face serene. She'd practiced this expression in the mirror. Calm, composed, untouchable. Let them stare. Thaddeus was already seated at the head of the long table. He looked up when she entered. She saw surprise flicker across his face. He'd expected her to hide, to cry more, to make a scene. Instead, she walked towards her designated seat with perfect posture. Her footsteps were measured and graceful. Every eye in the room followed her. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice clear and formal. "Not Thaddeus, not my husband, just the title." "Aurelia," he replied, his brow furrowed slightly. "Did you sleep well?" The question was absurd, cruel even, but his tone suggested he genuinely wanted to know. She met his gaze directly, as well as could be expected given the circumstances. Silence rippled across the table. Several nobles shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Isabella, seated 3 places down from Thaddeus, watched with narrowed eyes. Aurelia served herself from the platters in front of her. Eggs, fresh bread, fruit. Her hands were perfectly steady. She ate with deliberate calm, as if this were any normal morning, as if her heart hadn't been ripped apart just hours ago. Thaddeus tried again. "Aurelia, about last night." "There's nothing to discuss, Your Majesty," she interrupted gently but firmly. "You made your position clear. I respect that." She saw confusion cross his face, maybe even disappointment. What had he expected? Tears? Anger? Dramatic confrontations? She gave him none of those things. She finished her meal, dabbed her lips with the napkin, and stood. "Excuse me, I have duties to attend to." She left without waiting for permission, without looking back. The moment she was out of the great hall, away from all those watching eyes, she allowed herself one deep, shaky breath. Her hands were trembling now, but she'd done it. She'd faced him, faced them all, with dignity intact. Now came the hard part, building a life in this place. Aurelia spent the rest of that first morning exploring the castle. Not the public areas she'd seen during the wedding preparations, the forgotten corners, the neglected spaces. She found the healing wing on the third floor of the East Tower. It was a disaster. Outdated equipment, disorganized storage, supplies scattered across multiple rooms with no system. The medicinal garden visible from the window was overgrown, valuable herbs choking under weeds. It was perfect. Here was something she could fix, something she could build, something that mattered. She found Molly in the kitchens, overseeing the preparation of lunch. "I'd like to reorganize the healing wing," Aurelia said without preamble, "and I'll need gardeners to help restore the medicinal garden." Molly studied her with sharp eyes. The old woman had been running the palace staff for 30 years. She'd seen 3 queens come and go. "The last 3 queens never bothered with the healing wing," she said carefully. "I'm not the last 3 queens." Something like approval flickered across Molly's face. "I'll assign you 2 gardeners and get you the supplies you need." "Thank you." By afternoon, Aurelia had opened the healing wing's doors to anyone who needed care. Word spread quickly through the castle. Within hours, she had her first patient, a young maid named Elise. She was terrified, cradling her left hand against her chest. The wound was infected, swollen, red streaks climbing up her arm. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty," Elise whispered. "I know you're busy." "But the other healers said they couldn't see me until next week, and I thought—" "Sit down," Aurelia said gently. She examined the wound carefully. The infection was bad. Without treatment, it could spread to the blood. Elise could lose the hand, maybe the arm, maybe her life. "This will hurt," Aurelia warned, "but I can save your hand." The girl nodded, tears already streaming down her face. Aurelia placed her hands over the wound. She closed her eyes and reached for her gift. It started as warmth in her chest, a golden glow that built and built until she could feel it humming in her bones. Then it traveled down her arms, into her palms, and out through her fingertips. The girl gasped. Aurelia felt the infection as a dark presence in the tissue. She drew it out carefully, methodically, pulling the poison from healthy flesh. At the same time, she encouraged the cells to knit back together, faster than nature intended. Guided by her power, the glow intensified. Golden light filled the room. When she finished, the wound had closed completely. The flesh was pink and healthy. Only a faint scar remained. Elise stared at her hand, then at Aurelia. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." "You're welcome. Keep it clean. Come back if there's any pain." The girl left with grateful tears, and Aurelia felt something shift inside her chest. This was what mattered, not broken hearts or cold husbands or political marriages. This work. These people. Over the next 3 weeks, more patients came. Servants who'd suffered for years with untreated ailments. Children with fevers. An elderly gardener with terrible arthritis in his hands that made it almost impossible to work. Aurelia treated them all. She worked from sunrise to sunset, healing, organizing, building something real. The castle staff began to love her. She learned their names, asked about their families, and treated them with respect. She was accessible in a way queens rarely were. She heard the whispers, the comparisons. "The new queen actually cares about us." Isabella Ashford never lifted a finger to help anyone but herself. "Did you see how she healed my daughter?" The fever broke in minutes. Aurelia didn't encourage the talk, but she didn't discourage it either. Let them see the difference between a woman who wanted power and a woman who wanted to serve. She saw Thaddeus occasionally, in hallways. At formal dinners. During council meetings she was required to attend. He watched her. She could feel his eyes on her when she worked in the healing wing. When she walked through the gardens gathering herbs. When she sat at the far end of the table during meals. He tried to speak to her several times. She was always polite, always formal, always brief. "Your Majesty, I was wondering—" "I'm sorry, I have a patient waiting." "Aurelia, could we—" "Forgive me, the gardeners need direction." She gave him nothing to hold on to. No anger he could apologize for. No tears he could comfort. Just cool, professional distance. It clearly unsettled him. Good. One afternoon, 3 weeks after the wedding, Aurelia was in the medicinal garden. The sun was warm on her shoulders. She was on her knees in the dirt, carefully transplanting feverfew seedlings. Her dress was covered in soil. Her hands were filthy. She'd never been happier. "Your Majesty?" The voice was female, smooth, cold. Aurelia looked up. Isabella Ashford stood at the edge of the garden, dressed in an expensive purple gown, not a hair out of place. She looked down at Aurelia with barely concealed contempt. "How industrious you are," Isabella said. The words dripped with mockery. "Playing in the dirt. Aurelia stood slowly. She brushed soil from her hands but didn't bother with the dress. I'm gathering medicinal herbs, she said calmly. Feverfew for headaches, chamomile for anxiety. She paused. Though I suppose you wouldn't know about such things. Isabella's eyes flashed. I know more than you think. I'm sure you do. The other woman stepped closer, close enough that Aurelia could smell her perfume. Expensive, cloying. I hope you understand your place here, Isabella said, her voice dropping low. Thaddeus and I have history, a bond deeper than any ceremony could create. I understand perfectly, Aurelia replied, meeting her gaze steadily. You're welcome to him. Isabella blinked. Clearly that wasn't the response she'd expected. I have more important work to do, Aurelia continued. She knelt back down in the dirt, dismissing Isabella entirely. For a long moment, the other woman just stood there. Then she turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the stone path. Aurelia's hands were shaking, but Isabella didn't see. That evening, Aurelia was in the healing wing treating a child with a persistent cough when she felt eyes on her. She glanced up. Thaddeus stood in the doorway. Their gazes met for just a moment. He looked confused, like he was trying to solve a puzzle and all the pieces kept shifting. Aurelia turned back to her patient, a little girl, maybe 7 years old, with her mother hovering anxiously nearby. This will help, Aurelia said gently, giving the child a spoonful of honey mixed with thyme extract. Take this twice a day for a week. The cough should ease. Oh, thank you, Your Majesty, the mother said, relief clear in her voice. We're so grateful. They left. Aurelia cleaned and organized her supplies, very aware that Thaddeus was still standing there. When she finally looked up again, he was gone. That night, Aurelia stood at her window, looking out over the moonlit gardens. She was exhausted. Her hands ached from healing. Her knees hurt from kneeling in the garden. Her heart still had a hollow space where her wedding night dreams used to live. But she'd survived 3 weeks. She'd built something, created value, earned genuine respect from the people she served. If she couldn't have love, she would have purpose. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. What she didn't know was that Thaddeus stood at his own window 1 room over, looking out at the same moon, the same gardens, thinking about his wife, the one he'd rejected, the one he couldn't stop watching, the one whose absence felt like a physical ache in his chest. His wolf was restless, pacing, agitated in a way it had never been with Isabella. He didn't understand it. He had the blood oath, he had duty, he had everything planned. So why did watching Aurelia kneel in the dirt, healing a child, make his chest feel tight? Why did her cool formality cut deeper than any anger could have? Why couldn't he stop thinking about the moment under the oak tree when he'd almost kissed her? He pressed his palm against the window glass. Cold, like the distance between them. But underneath, something was burning. Something his rational mind didn't understand, but his wolf recognized with absolute certainty. Mine. The word echoed in his head, primal and possessive. Thaddeus shook his head sharply, tried to push the thought away. He had the blood oath, he had Isabella, he had duty. But his wolf didn't care about oaths or duty. His wolf only knew one thing. That woman in the next room, the one he'd rejected, the one who now looked at him like a stranger, the one who made his chest ache every time she walked away. She was his, and he'd thrown her away. 4 weeks had passed since the wedding night that shattered everything. 4 weeks of Aurelia building her healing empire 1 patient at a time. 4 weeks of Thaddeus watching from shadows, his confusion growing with each passing day. 4 weeks of Isabella seething as she saw her position slipping away. 4 weeks that changed everything. The morning Dorian Stormfang arrived. Frost covered the castle grounds like scattered diamonds. Aurelia was in the healing wing, treating an elderly woman's swollen joints. Golden light flowed from her palms, warm and steady, easing inflammation that had plagued the woman for years. Oh, that's wonderful, the woman sighed. Bless you, Your Majesty. Come back in 3 days, Aurelia said gently. We'll do another treatment. After the woman left, Molly appeared in the doorway. Your Majesty, there's a visitor, Alpha Dorian Stormfang from the Northern Territories. He's requested an audience with you specifically. Aurelia looked up, surprised. She'd never met the Northern Alpha. Did he say what this concerns? Medical matters, something about an illness affecting his pack. Show him to the library. I'll be there shortly. Aurelia cleaned her hands and changed her apron. When she entered the library 10 minutes later, she found a man standing by the windows. He turned at the sound of her footsteps. Dorian Stormfang was nothing like Thaddeus. Where the king was all dark intensity and brooding silence, this man was warmth and openness. Sandy hair that caught the morning light, brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled, Tall, yes, and clearly powerful, but there was an easiness to him that put people at peace. Your Majesty? He bowed, not too deep, respectful but not servile. I'm honored to meet you. The reports of your healing skills have reached even the Northern Territories. You're too kind, Alpha Stormfang. Welcome to Shadow Crown. Please call me Dorian. Then you must call me Aurelia. His smile widened. Gladly. They settled into chairs near the fireplace. Dorian explained the problem plaguing his pack, a respiratory illness that had appeared 3 months ago. Started with the elderly and children. Persistent cough, fever, difficulty breathing. Traditional treatments weren't working. We've lost 12 people, he said quietly. I can't lose any more. Aurelia's healer instincts kicked in immediately. She asked questions, symptoms, progression, environmental factors, what they'd tried. Then she went to the shelves and pulled down 3 massive volumes on respiratory diseases. Here, she said, opening the first book. This describes a similar illness from 40 years ago. It spread through the mountain packs. Dorian moved his chair closer so he could see the pages. They spent the next 2 hours buried in medical texts. Aurelia forgot about everything else. Forgot about her broken marriage. Forgot about the cold distance between her and Thaddeus. Forgot about Isabella's threats. This was what she loved. Solving puzzles, healing the sick, using her knowledge to save lives. Dorian was surprisingly well informed about northern herbs. Together they identified several combinations that might work. Plants that grew in the mountain regions. Treatments his healers could prepare. You're brilliant, Dorian said at one point, his admiration genuine. No wonder Thaddeus married you. Aurelia's smile faded. Trust me, she said, her voice suddenly bitter. My healing ability was the only reason. Dorian's expression shifted. Understanding, sympathy. I'm sorry, he said quietly. That was thoughtless of me. It's fine, I've made peace with this situation. Have you? The question was gentle but pointed. Aurelia met his eyes, saw real concern there, not pity, not judgment, just kindness. I have my work, she said finally. That's enough. Is it? Before she could answer, she sensed someone else in the library. She turned to find Thaddeus standing in the doorway. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were locked on where Dorian sat close to her, their chairs angled toward each other, surrounded by open books. Dorian, Thaddeus said, his voice was tight. I didn't expect to find you here. Thaddeus? Dorian stood, easy and relaxed. Your wife has been incredibly helpful. We've been discussing the illness affecting my pack. I'm sure. The words were clipped, cold. Aurelia stood as well, keeping her expression neutral. Alpha Stormfang needed medical consultation, she said. I was happy to assist. Of course. Thaddeus's gaze moved to her, intense, unsettling. Aurelia, may I speak with you? I'm currently with our guest. Now, please. The command in his voice made her wolf bristle, made anger flash hot in her chest. But she'd learned control these past 4 weeks, learned to show nothing. Excuse me, Dorian, she said. I'll send you my notes on those herbal combinations. Thank you, Aurelia, for everything. She followed Thaddeus out of the library, down the corridor, into an empty council room. He closed the door behind them. Silence filled the space. Heavy, charged. What is it? Aurelia asked, keeping her voice level. What were you doing with Dorian? Discussing medicine. He has a respiratory illness affecting his pack. You were laughing with him. I heard you from the corridor. She stared at him. Was he serious? Is that a problem? He's a visiting alpha. You should maintain proper distance. Something hot and furious ignited in her chest. 4 weeks of cool composure. 4 weeks of swallowing her pain. 4 weeks of being the perfect, distant queen. It shattered. Proper distance? Her voice rose despite her best efforts. You rejected me on our wedding night. You sleep with Isabella while I'm in the next room. And now you're concerned about proper distance? Thaddeus's jaw clenched. That's different. How? How is it different? Because, he stopped, seemed to struggle with words, because you're the queen. Your behavior reflects on the kingdom. My behavior? Aurelia stepped forward, anger making her bold. I've done nothing but serve this kingdom since I arrived. I've healed your people, organized your chaotic healing wing, earned genuine respect from your staff. What exactly about my behavior concerns you? You were too familiar with him. I was being helpful, something you might try sometime. They stared at each other. The air between them crackled with tension. Aurelia could see something burning in Thaddeus's eyes, something wild and possessive that made no sense. Stay away from Dorian, he said finally. No, his eyes flashed gold, his wolf rising. That's an order. You're my king, not my keeper. Aurelia's voice was steel. You made it clear we have a political arrangement. Nothing more. That means you don't get to control who I speak with or how I spend my time. She turned and walked toward the door. Aurelia, we're done here, Your Majesty. She left him standing there and went straight to her chambers. Her hands were shaking. With anger. With confusion. What right did he have to be jealous? He'd rejected her. Chosen Isabella. Made it clear she was nothing but a political asset. But the look in his eyes, that hadn't been political. That had been possessive. Territorial. She didn't understand it. Didn't want to understand it. She had work to do. Patience who needed her. A life she was building, piece by careful piece. Thaddeus Shadowcrown and his confusing behavior would have to wait. Over the following week, Dorian became a genuine friend. He sought her out during breaks in his diplomatic meetings. Always respectful, always interested in her work. They had dinner together twice in the public dining hall. Perfectly innocent meals where they discussed healing techniques and territory management. He made her laugh with stories from the northern territories. Tales of harsh winters and stubborn wolves and the peculiar politics of mountain packs. For the first time since her wedding, Aurelia felt something like happiness. What she didn't notice was how often Thaddeus appeared wherever she and Dorian happened to be. In the library, in the gardens, in the corridors. Always watching, always tense. His hands clenched, his jaw tight. But others noticed. The king's been in a foul mood all week, Molly mentioned one morning while helping Aurelia organize supplies. Snapping at counselors, pacing his study at all hours. That's not my concern, Aurelia said. Isn't it? He watches you constantly, Your Majesty. Everyone's noticed. He feels guilty about the wedding night. Nothing more. Molly gave her a look that said she didn't believe that for a second. But she didn't push. That evening, 1 week after Dorian's arrival, Aurelia was in the medicinal garden. The sun was setting, gold and pink painting the sky. She sat on a stone bench, taking a rare moment of rest after a long day in the clinic. Footsteps approached. May I join you? Dorian asked. Of course, he sat beside her, close but not inappropriately so. They watched the sunset in comfortable silence. You know, Dorian said eventually, you deserve better than this. Aurelia looked at him. Better than what? Than a political marriage to a man who doesn't see what's right in front of him. Her throat tightened. It is what it is. It doesn't have to be. He turned to face her fully. Aurelia, if things were different, if you weren't bound here, I would court you properly, the way you deserve to be courted. She felt tears prick her eyes. Not because she had feelings for Dorian, but because the kindness, the simple recognition of her worth meant everything. That's kind of you to say. I mean it. He took her hand gently. His touch was warm, brotherly. You're remarkable, brilliant and kind and strong. Any man would be lucky to have you. She smiled sadly, squeezed his hand. Thank you, Dorian. Truly. What neither of them knew was that Thaddeus stood in the shadows near the garden wall, watching, seeing Dorian take Aurelia's hand, seeing the tender way he looked at her, seeing her sad smile, and something inside Thaddeus snapped. His wolf surged forward with violent force. His vision blurred, then sharpened. Gold flooded his eyes. His hands shifted partially, claws extending. Every instinct screamed the same word. Mine. He wanted to attack, wanted to rip Dorian away from her, claim her right there. Make it clear to everyone that she belonged to him and him alone. The rational part of his mind knew that was insane. He'd rejected her. He had Isabella. He had the blood oath. He had no right to this possessive fury. But his wolf didn't care about rights or logic or oaths. His wolf knew its mate when it saw her, and watching another male touch her was unbearable. Thaddeus turned and ran. He fled into the forest beyond the palace walls, letting his wolf take over completely. Bones shifted, fur erupted. Within seconds, he was running on 4 legs instead of 2. He ran for hours, through the deep forest, past the northern border, into territory he hadn't visited in years, trying to outrun the confusion, the rage, the desperate, aching need. When he finally returned at dawn, exhausted and covered in dirt, he stood outside Aurelia's chambers. He could hear her breathing softly inside, asleep. The urge to go to her was overwhelming. Instead, he went to his own chambers and stared at himself in the mirror. His eyes were still slightly golden, his hair wild, his formal clothes torn and filthy from the run. What's happening to me? He whispered to his reflection. He'd never felt this way with Isabella. Never felt this consuming need to possess someone, be near them, protect them. The blood oath pulled him toward Isabella. Yes, but it felt like obligation, duty. Whatever this was with Aurelia, this felt like starving. The next morning, Thaddeus sought out Elder Celestia Ravenclaw. She lived in the highest tower of the castle, a circular room filled with dried herbs and ancient books and the smell of incense. Celestia was the oldest living shifter in the kingdom, a seer who'd guided 3 generations of alphas. She had eyes like winter fog and a way of seeing straight through you. She was expecting him. "Took you long enough, young king," she said without looking up from the herbs she was grinding. "I need to understand something," Thaddeus said. "You need to understand many things. Be specific." "The blood oath with Isabella. Why does it feel wrong?" Celestia finally looked at him, her ancient eyes sharp. "Because it is wrong. It was always wrong." "What do you mean?" "Sit down. This will take some explanation." Thaddeus sat, his heart pounding. Celestia poured tea neither of them would drink and settled into her chair. "You were 12 when Magnus Ashford performed the blood oath ritual." "Yes, Isabella and I agreed to it together." "Did you, or were you 2 manipulated children who didn't understand what they were binding themselves to?" Thaddeus frowned. "We both consented." "Consent given under manipulation isn't true consent. Tell me, how did the ritual come about?" He thought back. 12 years old, training in the courtyard with the other young wolves. "I fell during combat practice," he said slowly. "Cut my arm badly. Isabella helped me bind it. Her father was there. He suggested the blood oath would strengthen the bond between our families. And you, a bleeding 12-year-old in pain, agreed." Yes." Celestia's expression hardened. "Magnus Ashford used your blood without your true understanding. He wanted his daughter to be queen. So he ensured you'd be bound to her before you could ever find your real mate." "My real mate?" "Your fated mate, the one chosen for you by the moon goddess herself." Thaddeus's mouth went dry. "There's no such thing. Fated mates are myths." "Are they?" Celestia leaned forward. "Then explain why your wolf is obsessed with your wife. Why you can't stop watching her, thinking about her, feeling possessive rage when another male comes near." The words hit him like a physical blow. Don't lie to me, Ba. Or to yourself. Aurelia Moonshadow is your fated mate. She always has been." The room seemed to tilt. That was impossible, wasn't it? But even as his mind rejected the idea, something deep in his chest recognized the truth of it. "Think about it," Celestia continued. "You courted her before the wedding, didn't you? Felt drawn to her in ways you couldn't explain." He had, during those walks in the garden. Those conversations about herbs and healing and nothing important. He'd felt something pulling him toward her. Something that went deeper than attraction or political advantage. The moment under the oak tree when he'd almost kissed her. When every fiber of his being had screamed to close the distance. To claim her mouth. To never let her go. He'd pulled back because of the blood oath. Because he thought his heart belonged to Isabella. But what if he'd been wrong? "The blood oath suppressed your ability to recognize the bond," Celestia said. "But fated mate bonds are powerful, stronger than any magic. Eventually it fights through." "That's what's happening now," Thaddeus whispered. "Your wolf knows its mate, even if your conscious mind has been too stubborn to accept it." He stood abruptly, paced to the window, looked out over the gardens where he'd watched Aurelia with Dorian last night. "If this is true, why didn't you tell me before the wedding? Would you have listened? You were convinced the blood oath was real love. Sometimes people need to discover truth for themselves." "How do I break it? The blood oath?" Celestia's expression grew grave. "That's the difficult part. Blood oaths typically require the death of one party to break." Horror flooded through him. "No, there has to be another way." "There is one. A stronger bond must override it. The fated mate bond could do it, but only if you complete the claiming ritual. The claiming ritual requires mutual consent and consummation." "Yes." Thaddeus thought of Aurelia's cold formality, the way she looked through him like he was a stranger. "She hates me." "Then you have work to do." He turned to face the elder. "What do you mean?" Celestia stood, moved to her window that overlooked the east wing. "I mean that you'd better hurry. Mary. Because Isabella Ashford knows she's losing you, and desperate people do desperate things." Ice slid down Thaddeus's spine. "What do you mean?" "I mean that Isabella has access to the healing wing. She knows poisons and medicines. And she sees Aurelia as the obstacle between her and the throne." "Isabella wouldn't she?" Celestia's voice was sharp. "Her father orchestrated a blood oath using a child's blood. You think his daughter is above murder?" Thaddeus ran. He had to find Aurelia, had to protect her, had to warn her. But when he reached the healing wing, she was laughing with Dorian again, her whole face bright with joy, and the words died in his throat. How could he tell her she was in danger when she'd never believed he actually cared? How could he claim her as his mate when he'd rejected her on their wedding night? He'd made such a mess of everything, and now Aurelia might pay the price. While Thaddeus spiraled, Isabella was planning. She'd watched the king's obsession with Aurelia grow, watched the blood oath weaken, felt the bond she'd taken for granted slipping away. She wasn't going to lose, not to some common healer with dirt under her fingernails and a bleeding heart for sick peasants. If she couldn't have Thaddeus, no one would. The Shadowbane poison was perfect, slow-acting, mimicking natural illness. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it would be too late, and Isabella had the perfect cover. She'd been visiting the healing wing, part of her new interest in helping the people. Everyone would think she was trying to befriend Aurelia. No one would suspect. She prepared the first dose carefully, mixed it into expensive tea leaves imported from the Eastern Territories. Then she carried the ornate tea set to Aurelia's chambers. "Your Majesty," she said when Aurelia opened the door, surprise clear on her face. "I wondered if we might talk. I feel we started off poorly." Aurelia's expression was guarded. "That's kind of you. May I come in?" Aurelia hesitated, then stepped aside. Isabella entered, taking in the simple furnishings. The medical books stacked on every surface, the herbs drying by the window. "I brought tea," Isabella said, setting down the tea set. "A peace offering." "I'm not sure what we have to make peace about," Aurelia said carefully. "I know this situation is difficult, for all of us." Isabella poured the tea, making sure to serve Aurelia from the poisoned pot and herself from the safe one. "I thought perhaps we could find some understanding." "Understanding? You're the queen. I'm close to the king. We'll be seeing each other often. It would be easier if we weren't enemies." Aurelia accepted the cup. Suspicion still lingered in her eyes. They made awkward small talk for 20 minutes. Isabella kept her expression friendly, her tone light. Finally, she stood. "Thank you for hearing me out. I hope we can start fresh." "Perhaps," Aurelia said diplomatically. After Isabella left, Aurelia stared at the tea for a long moment. It felt wrong somehow, but she couldn't explain why. She was being paranoid. Isabella was trying to be kind. Feeling foolish for being so suspicious, she drank it. It was actually delicious, fragrant and smooth, clearly expensive. That night, she felt a slight headache. Nothing serious. She attributed it to the long day and went to bed early. Isabella watched Aurelia's window from across the courtyard. A cold smile curved her lips. Let the game begin. Over the next 5 days, Isabella visited twice more, each time with peace offerings. Tea, imported chocolates, small gifts. Each time Aurelia accepted, wanting to give Isabella the benefit of the doubt. With each dose, the poison built in her system. The symptoms started slowly. Day 1, headaches that wouldn't go away. Day 2, unusual fatigue. She pushed through it. Day 3, a persistent low fever. Day 4, the headaches intensified. She took breaks between patients, sat down more often. Day 5, dark veins began appearing, faint, barely visible. Starting at her wrists, Aurelia noticed but told herself it was nothing. Stress, overwork. She had patients who needed her. She couldn't afford to be weak. On day 6, there was a council meeting, discussing territory borders, trade agreements, nothing that required her input. Aurelia sat at the long table trying to focus, but the room kept tilting. The voices sounded distant, underwater. Her vision blurred. She gripped the edge of the table, trying to stay upright. "Your Majesty?" One of the counselors spoke. "Are you well?" "I'm fine," she started to say, but the words came out slurred, wrong. Then her legs gave out. She felt herself falling, saw the floor rushing up. Strong arms caught her before she hit. Thaddeus. He'd moved with inhuman speed, crossed the room in a heartbeat, pulled her against his chest. Her skin was burning, fever raging despite the cool room. "Aurelia!" His voice was panicked, raw. "Aurelia, look at me!" Her eyes fluttered open, but they were unfocused. Glassy, dark veins were spreading, from her wrists, up her arms, across her neck, toward her face. "Something's wrong," she whispered. "I don't feel—" She went limp in his arms. "Get every healer in the castle," Thaddeus roared. "Now!" He carried her out of the council room, through the corridors, to his chambers. They were closer, the bed larger. He laid her down carefully, his hands shaking. This couldn't be happening. Not now, not when he'd just realized what she meant to him. Within minutes, 5 healers surrounded the bed, examining Aurelia with increasing concern. The fever is dangerously high, one said. These dark veins, I've never seen anything like it. Could it be an infection? There's no wound. Thaddeus stood beside the bed, feeling helpless. His wolf was going insane inside him, howling to protect its mate, but there was no enemy to fight. Nothing he could do. Isabella arrived, all false concern. I heard what happened, how terrible. She moved to the bed, performed what looked like a thorough examination. The symptoms are complex, she said finally. I'll need to prepare a special remedy. The herbs are delicate, it will take time. How much time? Thaddeus demanded. Hours, maybe less if I work quickly. Then go, now. Isabella left. Thaddeus sank into the chair beside the bed. He took Aurelia's hand, careful of the dark veins spreading across her skin. Don't leave me, he whispered. Please, I know I don't deserve it, but don't leave me. I was a fool. I've been a fool since the moment I rejected you. But I see it now, I see you. You're everything, my mate, my fated mate. I should have known from the first moment. Should have fought the blood oath. Should have chosen you. Aurelia didn't respond. Her breathing was shallow, labored. I'll fix this, Thaddeus promised. Whatever it takes, I'll save you. But he had no idea how. He didn't know that Dorian had been watching Isabella for days. Something about her had felt wrong from the start. Too smooth, too calculated. When he'd seen the way she watched Aurelia with cold eyes, his instincts had screamed warning, so he'd started following her. That evening, after Aurelia collapsed, Dorian saw Isabella slip into a storage room near the healing wing. He waited, then followed. Through the cracked door, he saw her mixing vials, her expression twisted with satisfaction. Just a little more, she muttered to herself. Soon, she'll be too weak to save. Dorian's blood ran cold. He kicked the door open. Isabella spun, eyes wide with shock. What have you done? Dorian demanded. Isabella's surprise quickly shifted to calculation. She reached for something on the table. A blade, maybe? Or another vial? Dorian was faster. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed her wrist, twisted until she cried out and dropped what she'd been reaching for. Tell me what you gave her. I don't know what you're talking about. He spotted the vials on the table, brought one to his nose. The smell was unmistakable. Shadowbane, you're killing her. Isabella laughed, the sound unhinged. She took everything from me. Thaddeus was mine. The throne was mine. That pathetic little healer ruined everything. You're insane. Maybe, but it's too late. The poison's been building for days. Without the antidote, she'll die by tomorrow. Dorian's grip tightened. Then you'll give us the antidote. Why would I do that? Because I'll drag you before the king, and he'll make you wish you'd never been born. Dorian hauled Isabella out of the storage room, through the corridors, into Thaddeus's chambers where Aurelia lay dying. Thaddeus was still beside the bed, holding her hand, his face drawn with fear. Thaddeus, Dorian said, we have a problem. Thaddeus looked up, saw Isabella struggling in Dorian's grip. His eyes flashed gold. She's the poisoner, Dorian said. I caught her in the act. Shadowbane poison. She's been dosing Aurelia for days. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. When Thaddeus spoke, his voice was barely human. Explain. Isabella tried to pull free, but Dorian's grip was iron. It's not what he says. He's lying. I found her mixing more poison, Dorian interrupted, showed the vials. She admitted everything, said Aurelia took you from her. Thaddeus's partial transformation was instant. Claws, fangs, pure alpha power radiating from him in waves that made even Dorian step back. Give me the antidote, Thaddeus said, each word precise and terrifying. Now! Isabella's defiance crumbled, but she rallied with a desperate malice. There isn't one. Not one I'm willing to provide. She looked at Aurelia's still form on the bed. If I can't have you, she can't either. You'll watch her die, just like I've had to watch you fall for her. You were mine, Isabella spat, tears streaming now. The blood oath! The blood oath was a lie, Thaddeus roared. Forced on me when I was a child, before I could find my real mate. He gestured to Aurelia. She is my true mate, chosen by the moon goddess herself. You never had me. You never could. Isabella's face crumpled. No, that's not... Guards! 6 armed men appeared. Arrest her! Lock her in the deepest cell we have. As the guards dragged Isabella away, she screamed, You'll never save her. She's already dying. You'll lose her just like I lost you. The door slammed, leaving Thaddeus, Dorian, and the dying Aurelia in terrible silence. There has to be something, Thaddeus said desperately. Some cure. There is one way. Both men turned. Elder Celestia stood in the doorway. Tell me, Thaddeus said. Anything. The mate's blood cure. Your alpha blood, given through the claiming ritual, can purge any poison. Your bond with her is that powerful. Then let's do it now. It's not that simple. Celestia moved to the bedside, examined the dark veins. She'll have to be conscious. The ritual requires her participation, and it will be agonizing for both of you. Your blood will fight the poison inside her body. You'll feel every moment of her pain through the bond. I don't care about the pain. There's more. If the bond isn't real, if I'm wrong about you being fated mates, the ritual will kill her. The alpha blood will reject her system entirely. Thaddeus looked at Aurelia's pale face, the dark veins spreading like shadows beneath her skin. The bond was real. He knew it was. He felt it every time he saw her, every time she was near. His wolf knew its mate. The bond is real, he said firmly. Celestia nodded. Then prepare yourself, young king. This will break you both before it heals her. I'm ready. We'll need to wake her first, and she'll need to consent. Celestia mixed something from her bag, a sharp-smelling tincture. She waved it under Aurelia's nose. After a moment, Aurelia's eyes fluttered open. What? Her voice was barely a whisper. Thaddeus knelt beside the bed, took her hand. Aurelia, can you hear me? Her green eyes found his face. Thaddeus, what happened? Isabella poisoned you. You're very sick, but I'm going to save you. Save me? There's a ritual, the mate's blood cure. I'll give you my blood and it will purge the poison, but you have to agree. You have to trust me. Her eyes were closing again. Trust you? You rejected me. I know, I was wrong about everything. You're my fated mate, Aurelia, the one chosen for me. I've been too blind, too controlled by the blood oath to see it, but I see it now. Please let me save you. A tear slid down her cheek. Fated mates, that's a myth. It's not. I swear to you, it's real. We're real. Let me prove it. Let me save you. She looked at him for a long moment. He saw the war in her eyes, the hurt he'd caused fighting against the hope that maybe, just maybe, he was telling the truth. Okay, she whispered finally. I trust you. Thaddeus felt something break open in his chest. Thank you. I won't let you down again. I swear it. Celestia handed him a ceremonial blade. Make the cut deep. The blood needs to flow freely. Thaddeus didn't hesitate. He drew the blade across his palm, felt it bite deep. Blood welled up immediately, dark red, potent with alpha magic. Now, Celestia said, hold her close. She needs to drink while you channel your power into her. Thaddeus lifted Aurelia carefully, supporting her against his chest. She was so light, so fragile. He pressed his bleeding palm to her lips. Drink, my love. At first she was too weak. Then his wolf surged forward, and the alpha command rolled through his words. Drink. The compulsion made her lips part, made her begin to drink his blood. The reaction was immediate and violent. Aurelia's back arched. A scream tore from her throat. Raw, agonized, the sound of a soul being ripped apart. The dark veins pulsed, writhing beneath her skin like living shadows. Fighting, resisting. The poison didn't want to die. Thaddeus held her tighter, felt every ounce of her pain crash into him through the bond that was forming between them. It was like being torn apart from the inside. His own back arched, his teeth clenched so hard his jaw cracked. But he didn't let go, didn't stop pouring his power into her. Golden light began to build in his chest, spreading down his arms, into his hands. Through his blood and into her body, the alpha blood was burning through her system like liquid fire. Inside Aurelia's body, a war was raging. The shadowbane poison dragged at her, pulling her down into darkness, into cold, into the peaceful silence of death. But something else burned brighter. Thaddeus's blood, his power, his very essence. It flooded through her veins like molten gold, scorching, destroying, rebuilding. It hurt worse than anything she'd ever experienced. Worse than her mother's death. Worse than the wedding night rejection. Worse than every moment of pain in her entire life, combined and multiplied. She wanted to give up, to let the darkness take her, to stop fighting. Then she heard his voice. You're mine. Thaddeus's words were raw with emotion, desperate. You've always been mine, and I will not lose you. Something deep inside her responded, a warmth that had nothing to do with fever or poison, a connection that felt older than time itself, older than the moon, older than the wolves who ran beneath it. Mine, she thought. Yours. The bond snapped into place, like lightning striking, like the world splitting open, like every star in the sky igniting at once. Golden light exploded through the room, candles flared impossibly bright, windows rattled in their frames, wind whipped through the closed space, making tapestries dance and scrolls fly. Dorian and the healer stumbled back, shielding their eyes. Elder Celestia stood firm, a smile on her ancient face. The dark veins began to recede, slowly at first, then faster. The poison couldn't fight the alpha blood, and the fated mate bond combined. It was being burned away, destroyed at the cellular level. Aurelia's screams faded to whimpers. Her eyes, which had gone completely white with pain, began to show green again. But something else was happening. The seal on her wrist, the faint mark she'd always had, began to glow. Violet light, ancient, powerful, it spread up her arm, across her chest, into her very bones. Thaddeus felt the shift through the bond, felt something massive awakening inside her. The seal shattered. The sound was like crystal breaking, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. Aurelia's eyes snapped fully open, but they weren't green anymore. They were violet, deep and luminous and filled with power that made the air itself tremble. For 1 second, her form flickered. Woman becoming wolf, becoming woman again. Too fast to fully see. But Thaddeus saw enough. White fur, violet eyes, larger than any alpha he'd ever seen. Then she was human again, gasping, shaking, but alive. The dark veins were gone completely. Her skin was clear, healthy, flushed with life instead of fever. The bond between them pulsed, warm, golden, absolutely unbreakable. They could both feel it, a thread of light connecting their souls. What hurt one would hurt the other. What one felt, the other would know. They were bound, truly, completely, fated mates. Aurelia, Thaddeus's voice broke. You're here. You came back. She reached up with a trembling hand, touched his face, felt the bond hum at the contact. What is this? She whispered. I can feel you inside me. Our bond, the fated mate bond. It's real. You're my mate, my true mate. Marked by the moon goddess herself. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't sad tears. They were something else. Relief, joy, recognition. I felt it, she said softly. During our courtship, I thought I was imagining the pull between us. You weren't. My wolf knew even when I was too blind to see it. I'm so sorry, Aurelia, for the wedding night, for pushing you away, for being too stubborn to recognize what was right in front of me. She touched the bond between them, felt it glow brighter. You're here now, that's what matters. He caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. I love you, not because of fate or bonds or magic, because you're brave and brilliant and stronger than anyone I've ever known. Because when I see you, I see home. I love you too, Aurelia whispered. Even though you made me cry on our wedding night. He winced. Will you ever let me forget that? Probably not, but I'll let you make it up to me. He smiled, really smiled, for what felt like the first time in forever. Then he kissed her, soft and reverent and full of promise. The bond flared gold, sealing completely, locking into place with a finality that could never be undone. They were whole, they were home. They were finally, truly together. When they pulled apart, Celestia was watching with satisfaction. Well done, young king. The bond is complete. The blood oath is shattered. Shattered? Thaddeus looked at his hand. The cut had already healed, but he could feel this difference. The blood oath that had pulled at him for 16 years was gone, completely. Fated mate bonds are stronger than any magic, Celestia said. When yours completed, it overwrote the forced oath entirely. You're free. Free. The word felt like spring after a long winter. Dorian stepped forward, relief clear on his face. I'm glad you're all right, Aurelia. Thank you, Dorian, for catching Isabella. You saved my life. You would have done the same for me. Both Thaddeus stood, pulling Aurelia carefully against his side. I owe you a debt, he said to Dorian. You protected my mate when I was too blind to see the danger. No debt, just take care of her, or I'll come back and challenge you. I will, every day for the rest of my life. The healers, who had been watching in stunned silence, finally found their voices. Your Majesty, we should examine you. But Aurelia shook her head. She could feel the strength returning to her body. The poison was gone. The bond had healed more than just the Shadowbane damage. She felt powerful, whole, new. I'm fine, she said, and meant it. That night, Aurelia slept in Thaddeus's chambers. in his bed, in his arms. Where she should have been on their wedding night, he held her like she was precious, like she might disappear if he let go. Through the bond, she could feel his emotions, the relief, the love, the lingering guilt. Stop, she whispered into the darkness. Stop what? Feeling guilty. We're here now, together. That's what matters. He pressed a kiss to her hair. You're too forgiving. I'm practical. We can't change the past. We can only build the future. Then let's build something beautiful. Together. Together. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, the bond humming contentedly between them. The next morning, the entire castle knew. The queen had nearly died, had been poisoned, had been saved by the king's blood in a fated mate bond. Isabella Ashford was a poisoner, a murderer, a traitor, and justice would be served. The great hall was packed. Every noble in the territory, every council member, every servant who could spare time from their duties. They all wanted to see this. Aurelia stood beside Thaddeus at the high table. She wore a gown of deep violet, the color of her awakened eyes. Her hair was braided with silver thread. She looked every inch a queen, and she felt it too. The power thrumming through her veins, the bond with Thaddeus making her stronger. Isabella was dragged in, chains on her wrists and ankles. Her hair hung in tangles. Her expensive gown was filthy. She looked up at the high table, saw Thaddeus and Aurelia standing together, saw their hands clasped, saw the unmistakable glow of a completed bond between them. Her face crumpled. Order! Thaddeus's voice rang through the hall. Absolute authority. Alpha command that made everyone fall silent. Isabella Ashford, you stand accused of attempted murder, of poisoning Queen Aurelia Moonshadow with a shadowbane. How do you plead? Isabella said nothing, just stared at the floor. You were caught by Alpha Dorian Stormfang. It's the act of mixing more poison. You confessed to dosing the queen over multiple days. You admitted your intent to kill her. Still silence. The penalty for attempted murder of the Luna Queen is death. However, Thaddeus's voice hardened. I will not give you the mercy of a quick end. You will be exiled to the Shadowlands, stripped of your title, forbidden from ever returning. You will live out your days knowing you lost everything because of your own twisted jealousy. Isabella finally looked up. Tears streamed down her face. I loved you, she whispered. You loved power, Thaddeus corrected coldly. You never knew me, you never tried. You just wanted the throne. He gestured to the guards. Take her away. As they dragged her toward the doors, Isabella screamed, This isn't fair, I was promised. The blood oath. The blood oath was forced on me when I was 12 years old, Thaddeus said. His voice carried through the hall. By your father, using manipulation and dark magic. It was never real, never valid. He pulled Aurelia closer. This woman is my true mate, chosen by the moon goddess, proven by the fated mate bond that saved her life. The hall erupted in whispers. Silence, Thaddeus commanded. There's more. The doors at the back opened again. More guards entered. Between them in chains walked Magnus Ashford. The counselor looked older, broken. His schemes had failed. His daughter was ruined. His power was gone. Magnus Ashford, Thaddeus said, you orchestrated a blood oath with a child. You manipulated a 12-year-old boy who was injured and in pain. You used dark magic to bind me to your daughter before I could find my true mate. What do you have to say for yourself? Magnus lifted his chin. Even now he had pride. I did what was necessary to secure my family's position. You committed treason against the crown, against the natural order, against the moon goddess herself. Thaddeus's eyes flashed gold. You are hereby stripped of your position on the council. All lands and titles are forfeit. You will spend the rest of your life in prison for your crimes. Magnus's composure finally cracked. You can't. I can. I am your king, and you dared to manipulate me, to steal my chance at true happiness, to endanger my mate. The guards dragged Magnus away. His protest faded as the doors closed. Thaddeus turned to face the assembled crowd. Let this be a lesson. No one threatens my mate. No one manipulates the crown. No one uses dark magic to subvert the goddess's will. He raised Aurelia's hand. Aurelia Moonshadow is my fated mate, my chosen queen, my Luna in every sense of the word. She has proven her worth 1,000 times over. Through her healing, through her service, through her strength. The crowd was silent, waiting. Anyone who disrespects her, disrespects me. Anyone who threatens her, threatens the crown. She is your queen. Honor her as such. Then, to Aurelia's surprise, Thaddeus knelt, right there, in front of everyone. He looked up at her, his steel gray eyes filled with love. I was a fool, he said. His voice carried through the silent hall. I rejected the most precious gift the goddess ever gave me. I hurt you, humiliated you, made you feel worthless. But you are not worthless. You are everything. And I will spend the rest of my life proving it to you. He kissed her hand. I love you, Aurelia Moonshadow. My mate, my queen, my heart. Tears streamed down Aurelia's face. I love you too, even though you're terrible at expressing emotions. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Thaddeus stood, pulled her close, and kissed her. Right there, in front of the entire court. The bond flared golden, visible to everyone, a physical manifestation of their connection. The hall erupted, cheering, applause, celebration. The servants she'd healed cheered loudest. The children she'd saved, the people she'd served. This was vindication. Public, complete, absolute. The woman who had been rejected on her wedding night was now claimed before the entire kingdom. The healer who had been called worthless was now recognized as the most valuable person in the realm. Justice, pure and perfect. When the cheering finally died down, Thaddeus made one more announcement. Tonight we celebrate. Tomorrow we begin rebuilding, together. The feast that night was magnificent. Music and dancing and food that seemed endless. The entire castle celebrated their king and queen, their fated mates, their future. Aurelia danced until her feet hurt, laughed until her sides ached, felt joy she'd thought was impossible just weeks ago. And through it all, Thaddeus never left her side. They were inseparable, touching constantly, the bond humming contentedly between them. Late in the night, they slipped away, back to their chambers, to privacy, to each other. Thaddeus closed the door and pulled her close, lone at last. Finally, he kissed her, slow and deep and thorough. The bond sang. I'm going to spend forever making up for that wedding night, he murmured against her lips. Forever sounds perfect. They had the rest of the night and every night after. For the rest of their lives, the weeks that followed were the happiest of Aurelia's life. She and Thaddeus were true partners. He handled the political aspects of running the kingdom. She managed the healing. Together they made decisions, solved problems, built something real. The healing wing thrived. With Thaddeus's full support, Aurelia expanded it. More healers, better supplies, free care for anyone who needed it. She began training the next generation, teaching young healers her techniques, passing on her mother's knowledge. It felt right, like honoring her mother's sacrifice, like building a legacy that would outlast her. Molly watched with approval. Your mother would be proud. I hope so. Dorian returned to the Northern Territories with the herbal combinations Aurelia had developed. 2 weeks later, he sent word. The illness was receding. Lives were being saved. She felt pride swell in her chest. This was why she healed. For this. One morning, 6 weeks after the mate bond completed, Aurelia woke feeling strange, nauseous, but not sick, just off. She treated a child's broken arm in the healing wing. The golden light flowed from her palms as always. Knitting bone, easing pain. That's amazing, the child breathed. You're all set, but no more climbing trees for 2 weeks. After the child left, the nausea returned, stronger. Aurelia pressed a hand to her stomach, frowned, then realization hit her like lightning. She knew these symptoms, had treated them in hundreds of women. Her cycle was late. She was exhausted, the nausea, the heightened sense of smell. She was pregnant. Her hand trembled as she placed it on her still flat stomach. A baby. Their baby. Conceived in those nights after the bond completed, when they'd been inseparable, lost in each other. Joy flooded through her, so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. She needed to tell Thaddeus, right now. She found him in the training yard, sparring with younger wolves, teaching combat techniques. He saw her approach and immediately stopped. Crossed to her. What's wrong? Are you hurt? Through the bond, he could feel her emotional turmoil. The joy and fear and wonder all mixed together. I need to tell you something. Anything. She took his hand, placed it on her stomach, even though there was nothing to feel yet. I'm pregnant, about 3 weeks along. Thaddeus froze. For one terrible second, she thought he was unhappy. Then his face transformed. Joy so pure it took her breath away. We're having a baby. We're having a baby. He kissed her desperately, then pulled back. Dropped to his knees right there in the training yard. Pressed his ear to her stomach even though it was far too early to hear anything. Hello in there, he whispered. I'm your father. and I can't wait to meet you." Aurelia ran her fingers through his hair, felt love swell in her chest so powerfully it almost hurt. This, this was what she'd been meant for. Not just the healing, though that was important. Not just being queen, though she took those duties seriously. But this, being loved, loving in return, building a family with the man the moon goddess had chosen for her. "I love you," she said. Thaddeus stood, pulled her close. "I love you more than I have words to express. You and this baby are my whole world. Even though you rejected me on our wedding night," he groaned, "you're never going to let me forget that, are you? Never." "Good. I deserve to be reminded of my stupidity for at least the next 50 years. Try forever," he laughed. Kissed the top of her head. Forever sounds perfect. The months that followed passed in a gentle rhythm. Aurelia's pregnancy progressed normally. She glowed with health. The baby grew strong. They converted one of the chambers near their rooms into a nursery. Violet and silver, colors of the sovereign healer line in the Shadow Crown house. Elder Celestia visited often, knitting tiny clothes, sharing wisdom about childbirth and child rearing. Dorian sent gifts from the north, soft furs, carved toys, a letter congratulating them both. The entire castle celebrated, their king and queen, their fated mates, having a child who would carry both bloodlines. It felt like the kingdom itself was healing, becoming whole. 3 months after discovering the pregnancy, Aurelia stood in the healing wing. She was 4 months pregnant now, her belly just beginning to show. The baby's first flutters starting. A young mother brought in her daughter. The girl had fallen, broken her arm badly. "This will feel warm," Aurelia said gently, "but it won't hurt." She placed her hands over the break. Let her magic flow. The golden light was brighter now, stronger. The pregnancy had amplified her power somehow. The bone knitted back together. The girl's eyes widened with wonder. "You're magic." "Just a healer, sweetheart." "No, you're magic, like the stories." After they left, Aurelia felt arms wrap around her from behind. Thaddeus. She'd felt him approaching through the bond. "Another successful healing?" he asked, his hand settling on her belly. "Just a broken bone. Nothing dramatic." The baby fluttered against his palms. He laughed with delight. "Our daughter agrees. Everything you do is dramatic." "Daughter, we don't know." "My wolf knows. We're having a girl, and she'll be just like her mother. Brilliant, strong, beautiful." Aurelia turned in his arms to face him. "What are you doing here? Don't you have a council meeting?" "It can wait. I wanted to see my mate." "Your mate is covered in healing salve and hasn't brushed her hair in hours." "My mate is perfect." She laughed, kissed him. Even after months, the bond still sent warmth through her every time they touched. "There's something else I need to tell you," she said softly. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about my mother, about the work she did." "Go on." "I want to build a healing academy, a place where anyone with the gift can learn, free training, no matter their bloodline or wealth. So no one else has to struggle like you did." "Exactly. And so my mother's legacy lives on. Healers saving lives, stopping plagues, easing suffering." Thaddeus smiled. "I think that's a beautiful idea. You have my full support and the kingdom's resources." "Thank you. Anything for you. Always." The baby fluttered again, harder this time. They both laughed. "She approves," Thaddeus said. "Or she's just uncomfortable." "No, she knows her mother is going to change the world." That evening they walked in the garden, the same garden where Dorian had once held her hand, where she'd felt so alone, so unwanted. Now Thaddeus walked beside her, his hand on her lower back, supporting her, loving her. They sat on the stone bench, watched the sunset paint the sky in gold and pink. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Aurelia asked. "No," Thaddeus admitted, "but I'm grateful every day that it did. I was walking through life blind, bound by magic I didn't understand, too stubborn to question what I thought I knew." He turned to face her, cupped her face in his hands. "You broke through all of that. You saved me just as much as I saved you." "We saved each other," Aurelia corrected. "Yes, we did." He kissed her as the sun set, the bond glowing warm and certain between them, a promise that had been written in the stars long before either of them was born. They'd found their way to each other through pain and rejection and poison and blood, but they'd made it, and now, together, they would build something beautiful, forever. 6 months later, on a spring morning when the castle gardens bloomed with new life, Aurelia gave birth. The labor was long, difficult, painful, But Thaddeus never left her side. He held her hand, let her crush his fingers, took every ounce of pain he could through the bond. When their daughter finally arrived, crying and perfect and healthy, Aurelia wept with joy. She was beautiful, dark hair like Thaddeus. But when she opened her eyes, they were violet, the sovereign healer mark. "She's perfect," Thaddeus whispered, awe in his voice. "She is." They named her Alara, after Aurelia's mother, the healer who had sacrificed everything. Alara Moonshadow Shadowcrown, heir to two ancient bloodlines, born from a fated mate bond, destined for greatness. Elder Celestia visited that afternoon, held the baby with gentle ancient hands. "She will be powerful," the seer said. "Healer and warrior both, the best of both her parents." "I hope so," Aurelia said. "I know so. The goddess chose well when she fated you two together." Dorian sent gifts, a letter of congratulation, and an invitation to visit the Northern Territories when Alara was old enough to travel. The kingdom celebrated for 3 days. Their princess, their future, their hope. And through it all, Aurelia and Thaddeus marveled at the tiny life they'd created. The baby who kicked and cried and slept in their arms. The daughter who represented everything they'd fought for. Love, family, future. One night, when Alara was 2 weeks old, Aurelia stood by the nursery window. The baby slept peacefully in her cradle, violet fabric draped above her. Silver moon and stars mobile, turning slowly. Thaddeus came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, rested his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. How we got here, how close we came to losing it all. But we didn't lose it. We're here, together, with our daughter." "I know, I'm just grateful." "So am I." They stood in silence for a moment, watching their daughter sleep. "Do you remember," Aurelia said softly, "what you said to me on our wedding night?" Thaddeus winced. "Unfortunately, yes, every horrible word. You said this marriage was political, that I shouldn't expect anything beyond what was required for appearances. I was a fool, the biggest fool who ever lived." "Maybe." She turned in his arms to face him. "But you changed, you grew, you chose me. I always chose you, I just didn't know it yet. And now? Now I choose you every day, every moment, for the rest of my life." He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of love. The bond hummed contentedly, complete, unbreakable, forever. Alara made a small sound in her sleep. They both turned to look at her. "She's going to be strong," Thaddeus said, "like her mother, and stubborn like her father." "Probably." They laughed quietly, careful not to wake the baby. "I love you, Aurelia Moonshadow Shadowcrown. Not because the moon goddess chose you for me, though I'm grateful she did, but because you're kind and brave and brilliant. Because you see people, really see them, and you use your gifts to help them. Because when I see you smile, my whole world lights up." Aurelia felt tears slip down her cheeks. Happy tears. "I love you too, Thaddeus. Even though you rejected me on our wedding night," he groaned. "Are you ever going to stop bringing that up?" "Never, not for the rest of our lives." "Good. I deserve it." "You do, but I'll let you keep making it up to me." "Forever?" "Forever." They stood together in the nursery. Parents now, mates, partners, king and queen. And as the moon rose outside the window, painting everything in silver light, Aurelia thought about her mother, the healer who had sacrificed herself to save hundreds, who had taught her daughter that true strength wasn't never falling, it was rising every time. Aurelia had fallen so far, rejected, humiliated, poisoned, nearly killed. But she'd risen, every single time. And now she stood here, in a castle that was home, with a mate who loved her, a daughter who would carry on both their legacies, a kingdom to heal, a future to build. She'd been told she was broken, worthless, weak. They'd been wrong. She was a survivor, a healer, a queen, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. The story that had begun with rejection on a wedding night had become something beautiful, something powerful, something real, a fated mate bond that saved two souls, a love that conquered manipulation and poison and doubt, a family built on truth instead of lies. And as Thaddeus held her close, their daughter sleeping peacefully nearby, Aurelia knew with absolute certainty that every moment of pain had been worth it, because it had led her here, home.